Hello horror hounds. For my last video, which was just a horror block unboxing, I mentioned in passing that I had intended at some point in the future to review a forgotten little gem called Magic from 1978, and I got a couple of comments about the future review rather than the unboxing, so I thought I'd just push that movie up the sort of priority watch list, and I'm really grateful that a couple of you guys mentioned that you loved the film or were interested in aspects of it, because it meant that I got to rewatch it sooner than I had intended to. So everyone wins here, because this is a brilliant little film. I don't know why more people don't know about it. It's bizarre that people don't talk about this movie. It stars Anthony Hopkins in one of his career best performances. It's directed by Richard Attenborough, who directed things like Gandhi and Chaplin and Shadowlands. It's written by William Goldman, who is responsible for Marathon Man, The Princess Bride. He wrote the screenplay to Misery, All the President's Men, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Like Marathon Man, Goldman wrote the screenplay. He adapted his own novel. It started off as a novel. If you've never read William Goldman's novels, read Magic, read The Princess Bride, read Marathon Man. The man fully understands the medium he's working in. He knows how to tell a story in prose form, and he knows how to tell a visual story, and he knows what works best with both. He pulls off tricks in writing that you can't pull off on the screen. And so his screenplay plays to the strengths of the story, and the written story plays around essentially the same story, but different types of sleight of hand. Magic is the theme of it, although that's a sort of play on stage magic, i.e. illusion work, or is there something actually supernatural going on? Both tellings of the story deal with slightly different kind of narrative sleights of hand, but this movie is fantastic. If you've not seen it yet, I will give you a brief pitch, and then you can go ahead and watch it spoiler free. It's one of these type of films that I think people sort of come across on late night TV, and you meet the film in sort of random different places on strange channels at strange hours of the night, and you think, oh, and that's an Anthony Hopkins movie. I've never heard of this one before. Let's see if it's any good, and it just sucks you in. So if it's ever sort of snuck up and grabbed you in that way, you'll be a fan of it. Otherwise, a lot of people tend to be oblivious about it. So if you want it to sneak up on you but are unsure, and the quality of the people involved I've just listed still doesn't make you unsure, my best pitch for this would be the feel of this movie is like, and I was thinking this while I was rewatching it, this is the kind of story a young Stephen King, so Cujo era, Dead Zone era type Stephen King, would tell if he was going to try and do his Psycho. It's like a young Stephen King's attempt at telling Robert Bloch's Psycho. And if that doesn't get you excited and turning for the off button because you don't want any spoilers, then I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to like any of the other movies I talk about on this channel, because it's all horror, baby. That being said, there are questions as to whether this is a horror film. A lot of people say that it's a psychological thriller. The marketing campaign for the film itself called it a terrifying love story. I'm going to put a link to the TV spot trailers that ran for the film. I was too young to catch those, but after rewatching the film, I thought I'd check out some of the sort of marketing material for it. Please check it out. It's about 28-30 seconds long, and if it doesn't make you think, fuck me, I have to see this fucking movie right away, then just don't worry about it. But it'll grab you. It's such a bizarre, fucking creepy ad campaign as well. It's just the ventriloquist's dummy Fats saying a little rhyme. Right, so pitch out of the way, the basics out of the way, the talent involved means we can talk about some of the nitty-gritty now. First and foremost, when I mentioned in passing that I was going to review this film, one of my subscribers asked me to specifically talk about the DVD picture quality, because he's been hanging out for a remaster and a Blu-ray release of this and wants to know whether it's worth getting the DVD. Long story short, if you don't already own it, then yes, the picture quality on this is absolutely fine, and it will mean that magic is in your collection and you can watch it at your leisure. Probably going by Sod's Law as well. If I recommend that you go out and buy it, and you do go out and buy it, that will probably mean that the following month there'll be a Blu-ray release announced and we can all get it on Blu-ray. There are times when an HD remaster transfer would have done wonders for the film. It's very obviously got a very well thought out and very beautiful colour palette. It contrasts the city to the country. There it goes from greys and blues and cold tones through to warm autumnal browns, rusts and golds. All of those things would absolutely pop and look gorgeous on a Blu-ray. They look fine enough on the DVD, enough for me to notice and comment about it. The scenes, very few of them that are set in almost complete darkness, I think they would really benefit from a special Blu-ray release. And if this does get a Blu-ray release, come on Arrow, come on Screen Factory, then those scenes in darkness, those blacks, will start to look, you know, gorgeous and rich and deep, rather than making the screen mostly black. But those type of scenes are very few and far between. This isn't a horror story that mostly takes place at night and in shadows. This is a horror story of the mind. While some people are comfortable calling it a psychological thriller, that's fine, and call Psycho a psychological thriller as well. I think horror is a broad church. My definition of horror is a broad definition, and I think that the genre that we love does manage to leach outside its own borders into thrillers, into sci-fi, into action adventure, into the psychological. So I'm calling it a horror film. The thing we really have to talk about when we're talking about magic is Anthony Hopkins. There is a school of thought that says that sometime after Silence of the Lambs, Anthony Hopkins started taking the paycheck, started turning up and saying the lines, started not being present. It's an allegation that's levelled at a lot of awesome actors. Pacino gets it, De Niro gets it. You can probably name half a dozen more than me. And there's a debate to be had as to whether or not that's the fact. If you want to see a vibrant, focused, completely on top of his game Anthony Hopkins, this is another reason why I don't understand why this movie's not talked about. This is a career best performance. Okay, his performance in Magic is going to go toe to toe with the best that he's ever done and the best that anyone has ever done. I was thinking while I was watching this, sort of comparing and contrasting a little with Child's Play, and that's a little unfair because the setups are completely different. In Child's Play, you know the doll's possessed, so you're always watching it. Whenever the doll's in frame, you're watching it, waiting for it to move, waiting for it to come alive. And I felt really sorry for Chris Sarandon and some of the other actors while I recently rewatched Child's Play, because they're acted off the screen by an inanimate object, just simply because when it's in the background or the foreground or the middle ground, you're watching it rather than them, because you want to see if it blinks, if the eyes move. With this, it's a ventriloquist's dummy. So it does move all the time. As the film goes on, what you want to start asking yourself is this purely in Corky's head, for that is the character that Hopkins plays, or is there a supernatural element to this? Is the dummy actually alive? And there would have been a danger that you would constantly be watching the dummy, Fats, all the time. It is amazing how Hopkins works with this prop, that your attention's not constantly on the dummy or constantly on him. It flips, and you kind of want to sit down and go, right, I'm going to focus on the dummy because I want to see if there's any time when it moves and he's not moving it. And you can't. He pulls your attention back, and there are times when you want to focus on him and he's doing a bit of shtick with Fats the dummy, and your attention can't help but go over to the dummy. And this is the misdirection I was talking about earlier. It's the whole, he's a stage magician and no one's interested in stage magic, so he uses the dummy as a prop to distract them, and everything's misdirection. And are you watching Hopkins when you should be watching Fats? Are you watching Fats when you should be watching Hopkins Corky, I should call him? And there were real genuine chilling moments for me. There were times when I realised I was watching Fats and it was just a dummy, and you just move your eyes by half a degree over to the head that's next to it, and you see Hopkins' face, which is a blank, a void there. It's a peerless performance, going from psychotic to completely empathetic, and you're on his side. Vulnerability to absolute insanity. And there are times when he does voiceover for the doll. He's not doing a ventriloquist act, but there are times when the doll's going and he's with his bottom lip and making his Adam's apple bob up and down, so you can see that he's doing the ventriloquisting. There's never a time when he's not doing that, but he dials it up and dials it down, and sometimes it's almost as though Fats is off screen saying stuff, and you're looking at his lips going, are his lips moving, or is Fats independent? Is Fats talking? It's endlessly fascinating, and that's the other great area of this movie, the willingness to be ambiguous. If you're a fan of films that are ambiguous as to whether they're to do with mental illness and psychosis, or the supernatural and the demonic, please check out my review for another underrated film, Session 9, that's hardly ever spoken about, which also walks that very specific tightrope between falling down one side or the other. Is Corky mad, or is Fats is Fats alive in some kind of way? And there are pros and there are arguments on both sides, and I'm not going to come down, but there are debates to be had, and there's evidence for both sides. Not least the final shot, which is eerie and bizarre in the extreme, done in a very specific way, with the actor involved, obviously whilst being filmed, not saying the lines, and then looping the lines in afterwards to make it look like they're doing a bit of ventriloquism. It's eerie, creepy. It possibly indicates a supernatural influence. It's one of the reasons I'm going to keep coming back again and again and again to magic. And a little bit like before there were so many different versions of Blade Runner, you could keep going back to Blade Runner and potentially changing your mind as to whether Deckard was or wasn't a replicant. That's sort of been answered now. I'm not going to answer the question whether Fats is actually alive or supernatural or demonic, because I want to keep returning to this movie, and I want to keep exploring it and teasing out and analysing it. I cannot recommend this film highly enough. If you thought Anthony Hopkins was great in Silence of the Lambs and you love his Hannibal Lecter and wished he'd done more horror, then watch a horror film where he is better than he is in Silence of the Lambs. Just quantum leaps above the performance he gives in Silence of the Lambs. It's a remarkable film.